Greetings and welcome to UNN. I'm your host Avery.
And I'm your host Paula.
Reporting to you live. There has been some recent growing tensions between political sides. Many states have seceded from the country, including Mississippi, and they're now being wary about this since all of this tension could cause America's first civil war.
To make matters worse, the Confederate side that had its first president, Jefferson Davis.
I enter upon the duties of the office to which have been chosen with the hopes that the beginning of our careers at the Confederacy will not be obstructed by hostile opposition to our enjoyment of the separate existence and independence we have exerted, and which, with the blessing of Providence, we intend to maintain.
Now moving on.
Let's hear from our reporter, Anna, who will be interviewing citizens from Mississippi.
How did you feel about the Mississippi seceding from the Union?
Well, I never liked the Union. I think that it was a good idea Mississippi seceded.
Oh, in that case, have a good day, mister.
I am finished. The president is extremely annoying and is not my ideal person.
Okay, thank you for your time.
That's just rude.
That's all for today. We'll keep you fellow citizens up to the current news.
Breaking news.
There has been a recent battle just after President Lincoln made the decision to send armed ships to Charleston, South Carolina, to resupply the beleaguered Union garrison at Fort Sumter.
Just 3 days later, Lincoln made a proclamation calling for the state's militias, around 75,000 troops, in order to take down rebellions. Let's report to the scene.
In your hands, my dissatisfied fellow countrymen, and not in mine, is the momentous issue of civil war. The government will not assail you. You have no oath registered to heaven to destroy the government, while I shall have the most solemn one to preserve, protect, and defend it.
That's all for today. We'll keep you fellow citizens up to the current news.
Boy, I feel like picking on someone today. Oh, hey! Give me your lunch money.
Luck and Luck, new Sydney Green, available at stores near you for more than 50% off. Welcome back to UNN News. Breaking news. A couple of hours ago, a battle struck the entire country from both sides, being the first battle ever since the Revolutionary War was declared.
General Irvin McDowell, leading this battle, led troops to Virginia to capture Richmond, the Confederate capital, and put an end to this war. However, the majority of McDowell's men were inexperienced volunteers who had signed up in hope of engaging in a quick battle, but had no idea what laid ahead of them.
They encountered a force under the command of General Pierre G.T. Beauregard, which was guarding a crucial railroad intersection in Virginia at Manassas. The Confederate was initially driven back by McDougall's forces, but reinforcements quickly arrived, including a brigade led by the General Thomas J. Jackson, who would come to be known as Stonewall for his tenacity in defending the area.
Now, let's hear from a reporter.
Who actually won the battle?
But we sadly lost, just because our troops were not prepared.
Why were the troops not prepared in time?
Well, our troops were young bloods that were volunteering just over a little bit 90 days. They were not prepared at all.
Can you tell us a little bit about the battle? Everyone wants to know about it.
So at first, we were winning, but then after a while, we couldn't even believe it. All the reinforcements came for them, and they beat us.
Thank you, Mr. Dowell.
There's been countless deaths on the battlefield, but most were in the hospitals. The reason for this was the lack of medically trained staff. May all who have passed be honored. It has been a terrible start for our nation.
There has been new information about new inventions that will be used during the war.
Professor Thaddeus Lowe, a self-taught scientist and showman, has experience on rising balloons before the Civil War broke out. He impressed Lincoln with his experiment, so he offered his services to the government.
Virginia Lowe was directed to set up a USA Balloon Corps, which also included the Potomac Army on the Peninsula Campaign. This was the first time aerial reconnaissance was used in warfare. This gathered information from the Confederate and gave it to officers on the ground.
There's also been a massive outbreak of dysentery, typhoid fever, pneumonia, mumps, measles, and tuberculosis spreading among the poorly sanitized camps.
To continue with the topic of hospitalization, Clara Barton, the first ever citizen to volunteer to be a nurse, has been cleared out the city's clinics to go among the officers within the field.
Her presence and the supplies she brought with her in her 3 armed force wagons was particularly welcome at the fight of Antietam, where exhausted specialists were attempting to make bandage out of corn husks. Martin started organizing able-bodied men to perform while helping carry water and plan nourishment.
We advise you to be careful in those camps protecting our nation. We'll see you later on the UNN News. This day will forever be remembered in history since it marks the first battle the Union has won gloriously.
We splendidly won the Battle of Fort Donelson when Ulysses S. Grant led. He and his troops conquered Fort Donelson in Cumberland River in Tennessee. In order to clear a path for escape, the Confederates planned a counterattack against the Union troops after initially repelling an attack by Union gunboats.
The Confederates stopped and withdrew their fortifications as they appeared to be succeeding. That gave Grant time to figure out a weak point in the Confederate line and attacked it. Now, let's hear from our reporter.
What were some thoughts running through your head during the battle?
The main goal running around my head was space shape and get shot and just serve the country.
This South's gonna win!
Can you tell us more? What was the contribution during the battle?
Well, I was on the front line, fighting for my life. All I could think about was my wife and kids' house and how I can lose my life.
Last question. Do you think the North will have a chance to win?
Definitely, we will beat those low lives. We will build their entire bus on the bus of 7.
On the same day, Robert E. Lee and his army invaded Maryland in an attempt to make an effort to make the Union retreat.
But lucky for us, President Abraham Lincoln sent George McClellan and his army to stop him. The two armies first met themselves at dawn in the cornfield of Spartanburg, Maryland, where their motions was hidden by tall corn cobs while they were shooting at each other. Now moving on to the advancements in modern warfare.
There has been a recent discovery that troops have been using a bullet called the mini ball. The mini ball is designed to give a whistling sound when fired, and when it struck soldiers, it shattered bones. That's the reason why so many limbs were amputated, because medically trained professionals couldn't fix the broken bones.
We also have our first USS Monitor. It was based on the structure of the USS Merrimack. The USS Monitor, which has been manufactured in Brooklyn, New York, in a brief moment. It is one of the most impressive tanks we have on display as well being used in naval and ground fair battles. It is made out of riveting plates together. It also has a revolving turret.
Although we have the newest model, the Confederate is constructing its own monitor on an abandoned hull using a captured USS Merrimack. Although it lacked the monitor's revolting turret, its metal plate made it invincible to cannonballs.
Now on to the break.
Slaves for sale! Slaves for sale! Buy one slave, then 2 slaves for free. Now, how does that deal sound?
Sir?
Yes,
You
sir.
follow me or something?
Sure.
So, actually, we don't allow slave owners here.
No slaves allowed in the North. All slave owners will be dead.
Welcome back on UNN News. We have just received information that Lee once more has invaded the Union in an effort to defeat it there, threatened Washington, D.C., and pressured Lincoln into signing a peace pact.
South of Gettysburg, on Cement Ridge, were the Union soldiers. Confederate Gen. George Pickett led 2 battle lines in an assault of the Union position after 2 hours of firing. Pickett charge, as it came to be called, was a catastrophe, with 60% of the deaths falling on the Confederates. Lee felt compelled to turn around and stop the invasion.
The Confederacy suffered a severe defeat in combat, and both sides suffered the terrible losses. About 23,000 Union soldiers died, compared against 28,000 Confederate soldiers. The South's ambition for the Confederates' international recognition were dashed. These attempts to redesign dejected, but President Jefferson Davis rejected him.
Let's hear from our reporter reporting at the scene.
I'm Luke, reporting to you about the battle in Gettysburg. It seems like thousands of people on your side are passing away because of the cause that the South occurred. The main cause of the Civil War in America is possibly an arguable subject in American history. Believe it or not, even before the war was over, the academics in the North and South start to analyze and explain the point behind slaughter. Georgia, Mississippi, Texas, and the South Carolina have protected slavery while claiming the varying rights of state for the injustices, like abusing money and what the military does. Some documents didn't have the attention that much. The South states were against the country to defend the rights of state and slavery, not see eye to eye with the high taxes. States in the South trust that the government would abolish slaves, not respect the rights of state, and recommend high taxes law. Now let's hear from one soldier who was present that. During the war, do you have any feelings pushing towards you?
I thought I was gonna die.
You make any contribution to the battle?
I was in the front lines, and there was countless of deaths. Terrible.
How was the war?
Really bad.
I think you're... Let's sit down.
Thank you.
We will see you on the next program on UNN News. Welcome back to UNN News.
There has been information sent that Lincoln will now adjust the battlefield near Gettysburg. Let's hear from what he has to say.
47 years ago, our dad was brought out, and on its mainland, it was a new nation, conceived in liberty, dedicated to the proposition that all humans in the world are created balanced. So now, we were enjoyed in a great civil war, and ours was an examination in case of those nations, or where any countries so conceived and authorized by the nation can we endure ourselves and come to dedicate a part of the farmland. We cannot dedicate ourselves. We cannot hollow in the ground and instead allow the brave people, living or dead, and struggling. The fear is consecrated about our poor strength and that this nation, below God, should hand over birth once more to liberty, and so that the government of the human by the populace and for the human should not perish from the earth.
That was a very meaningful speech. Now moving on. Lincoln also had made a 10% plan.
Let's hear from what Mr. Lincoln would like to share about his 10% plan.
The goal of this plan is after the war, the Southerners and the Northerners ended a treaty. As a result, the 10% plan was established. The oath of allegiance, which requires at least 10% of the state's voters to take. As a result, it is required 10% of the main population to swear to the Union about the permanent freedom of slaves. After their oath of allegiance to the Union, the delegates drafted a new constitution that recreates them as a state union. By reestablishing their connection to the Union, the states will be protected from domestic abuse and invasion by Union under Article 4, Section 4 of the Constitution. However, this does not apply to everyone. This plan wouldn't pardon past members of Congress who left to support the Confederacy. Also include anyone guilty of harming black or white Union soldiers during the war.
That was a very thoughtful thing to do now. We will be moving on to a news reporter.
What do you think about Lincoln's plan?
Yeah, this is great.
Excuse me?
The official abolitionists will just those who are useless.
That's all for today. We'll keep you fellow citizens up to the current news.
You want to be the best dancer in your crib?
Well, then you better listen to me. For just $10.59.72 a month, you'll be the best dancer in the whole world. Now let's go. Now let's learn our first move. First, you put your hand in the front. Then you put your other hand on top of it. Put your big pants on and go down. Now, let's see you do it.
Welcome to UNN. I'm your host, Ethan, reporting to you live on April 26, 1865. It is a wonderful month in the North. On April 9th, Robert E. Lee, a Confederate general, has surrendered to the North. All their equipment was taken as we have won over the South. On April 1st, the Southern Confederate strongholds in Richmond and Petersburg fell to the Union. This, and the fact that we marched to the Confederates' capital the next day, forced Lee to surrender in the North Virginia to North General Grant. Today in Birmingham, North Carolina, General Sherman effectively made a Confederate General Joseph E. Johnson surrender his troops. Because of these brave men, the 4-year Civil War has finally come to an end.
Despite all this great news, no victory is perfect. Over 360,000 of our men have died, compared to the Confederate only 260,000. On top of this, on April 14th, 5 days after the South surrendered, Lincoln was assassinated. After promising the city he would go to the theater at the night, he met the cruel fate of death. A bullet went through his head, killing him. His private train brought his coffin to the burial site. The city grieved his death as they watched the train fade away. Let's hear from someone on the scene.
What do you think about Lincoln's death?
I will mourn his death. He was an incredible leader and shall be remembered in history.
This is Avery from UNN News, reporting to you from February 3rd, 1870. Today, the 15th Amendment was finally ratified and is now part of the Constitution. This amendment is the last part of the Reconstruction Amendments, a group of amendments that comprise of the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments. These all help the African American men in America get their rights. For the 13th Amendment, it saved all colored people by officially abolishing slavery. For the 14th, it granted citizenship for every person born on American soil. In other words, even if you didn't have American blood in your veins, you were still a citizen of the United States of America. Lastly, today's amendment, the 15th Amendment. This amendment allowed black men to finally vote. Although, whether you're white or black, if you're a woman, you can't vote. The 13th Amendment was ratified on December 6, 1865, and the 14th Amendment was ratified 3 years later in 1868. And now in 1870, the Reconstruction Amendments were finished.
From Mississippi.
Sorry.
Oh, wait. Now moving on.
To resupply the
Wait, again.
Breaking news.
There's been
I think we need to redo that one. Breaking news.
There's been a recent battle just
Guys, stop. In your hands. In your hands.
That's all for today. That's all for today. That's all for today. Bye.
News. A couple of hours ago.
Oh my god.
Which was guarding a crucial railroad intersection in Virginia at Manassas. Manassas. The Confederates were. Why are you laughing?
General Iron.
Come on, bro. How is that even funny?
General Iron. Hello. Bro, the cat just went.
No.
While they were shooting at each other. Now.
Say it. Oh my.
That was a very meaningful.
Stop. Funny. Is it funny looking me at it?
Let's go now.
Outbreak of dysentery. Welcome in the fan.
Fight!
At the fight of Antietam, where exhausted specialists Barton started organizing being able.
Porters.
Yes! Yes!
I entered the coffins, the duties of the office. I entered the open.
I don't have my phone!
Why are you still recording?
Don't dare!